Oops, we are recording. You're all set.
Thank you. Welcome to today's AIM Center webinar. I'm Cynthia Curry. I'm director of the AIM Center. That's the National Center on Accessible Educational Materials for Learning. If you're just arriving, please note that there are materials for download available for this webinar. Leslie is putting the link into the chat. It's also on your screen. It's a bit.ly, so it's bit.ly/QI series part 1. Closed captions are available through the instructions on the slide. So on your Zoom controls, you have a button for closed caption. Go ahead and select that, and you should see closed captions appearing along the bottom of your screen. And if you have any issues, please let us know through the chat. If you can hear us, but wondering about the chat, if this is new to you, the text chat is the way we ask you to communicate with us. We want to make sure that your voice is heard. We do mute all microphones because of background noise that sometimes creeps in. So please use the chat early and often. We'll be asking you some questions to participate through the chat. If you don't see the chat, you open the chat panel from the Zoom controls. And if it's not by default, which it should be, but there should be in the blue drop-down menu just above where you type your messages, please choose the option all panelists and attendees from that so that everybody sees your comments. And if you're a tweeter, please tweet out. Our hashtag is AIM4All, AEM numeral 4 all. We appreciate it when people are tweeting about our work. So today's topic, we're really excited to kick off our AIM Quality Indicator webinar series. This is part 1. It's meeting timely manner through a coordinated system. This is a 5-part series that goes through today and into April. We're really excited to have some of our friends from the AIM Best Practices cohort here to share their work. But before we talk about going into the specifics of this webinar, wanted to just go over the overview of the whole of the quality indicators for the provision of accessible educational materials. There was, within the description for today's webinar, there was a task that this was going to be a flipped type of webinar where you learn a little bit first, some of that didactic rote type of learning from information that's available on our website about the quality indicators, and then to come and listen to some of our best practices states talk about how have they implemented these quality indicators. But if you haven't had a chance to do that, you can go back and study, and we are here to help you. So if there are some things today that are new to you, please be sure to be taking notes and following up. What you'll hear is some practical ways to implement best practices around making sure that students have their materials and technologies in a timely manner. All of the quality indicators, however, there are 7 of them. We're talking about the first 2 today, a coordinated system and getting materials in a timely manner to students who need materials and technologies with accessible features and inaccessible formats. Written guidelines is our next topic. That's next week. Comprehensive learning opportunities and technical assistance, that is webinar 3. Quality indicators 5 and 6, which is all about data collection, and data use. That is webinar 4. And then the final webinar in the series will be on allocation of resources. But today we're talking about quality indicators 1 and 2. So as part of this webinar, by the end of it and after hearing from our friends from Iowa, Ohio, and Texas, we're hoping that you'll be able to explain in your own words the intent behind AIM quality indicators 1 and 2. So it may not be that you know all of the legalese, all of the technical issues and components around quality indicators 1 and 2, but hopefully you'll be able to explain the intent of those in your own words, which is an excellent start as you go back to your settings and start thinking about how can you improve the accessibility of the materials and technologies that are provided to your students in a timely manner. You'll be able to learn from the experiences and practices, of course, of other states to improve your own provision system, and then know where to go to build more background knowledge and collect resources for further learning. And there's no doubt that as a result of this webinar, you may have more questions than you do answers, and that's okay. The National Center on Accessible Educational Materials, we're funded through the Office of Special Education Programs to continue to provide technical assistance. So if you have questions, know that we're here. know that we're building on this webinar with additional webinars in this series about the quality indicators. So there'll be time to come back and spiral around to try to get a grasp on these quality indicators. And we're also really looking forward to learning from all of you who are out in the field, hopefully piloting these quality indicators and giving us feedback on how we can strengthen them and how we can make them better for all of you. So our presenters today, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves in turn, as each of them are going to be talking about what's going on in their states relative to quality indicators 1 and 2. But they are, who will be in turn, I'm Cynthia Curry, came in late, I'm the director of the AIM Center. We also have Joy Lyons, who is going to be representing Iowa, Rachel Schultz of Ohio, and Angela Standridge of Texas. So in turn, as they're each going to be talking about what's going on in their states around these quality indicators, they'll have an opportunity to tell you a little bit more about themselves and the agencies they represent. So a little bit about quality indicators 1 and 2, just in case you didn't have a chance to check these out before coming to today's webinar. Like I said, we are doing this in a flipped type of model where we're asking you to learn some of the background information about the quality indicators, then come to these webinars to hear about some ways that states and districts are implementing them. But here's a little bit of scaffolding as we go into what the states have to share with us. So quality indicator 1, the actual language of quality indicator 1 is that the agency has a coordinated system for the provision of appropriate, high quality, accessible materials and technologies for all learners with disabilities who require them. So the intent behind that quality indicator is simply that the coordinated system is a way that the agency has methods that ensure that learners who need accessible materials and accessible technologies, whether it's digital or whether it's print, are provided with them as part of a whole system. So the idea behind this is that it's not just one particular individual or one department that's responsible to make sure that students receive their materials and technologies in ways that they can use them, but it is part of the system. It's a forethought. It's built into the ecosystem. Some of the sample critical components under quality indicator 1, when you go to our website, if you haven't been there already, you'll notice that under all the quality indicators, there's also a list of critical components that explain what should be the parts that come together to make that quality indicator achievable. So under quality indicator 1, some of those components, and this is very much abbreviated from what you'll see on our website, but that there's a means for ensuring the provision of print materials in accessible formats. So print materials need to be converted into accessible formats, and there's also the technology available to deliver those alternative formats. So if it's digital text, if it's audio, it's not just the material that's provided to students in an accessible format, but also they need the technology in order to access those files. Whether or not the digital material is commercial or it's open education, an open education resource, whether it's something gets selected or created, so from any different avenue by which students are recipients of materials and technologies, whether it's something that's procured by the district, something that a teacher selects, even something that a peer creates for the classroom, that there's accessibility that's built into considerations across all of those systems by which students receive materials and technologies. And accessible technologies mean that they're usable without assistive technology or made usable with assistive technology. So there's a provision and means by which that happens when technology is selected, that it's compatible with AT, or accessibility is built in it in a way that those features support individual student needs. And there's also consideration for copyright protection. So some states may have a digital rights manager or somebody that's overlooking the whole process. If a copyrighted material needs to be converted into another format, that there's some consideration that there's somebody making sure that that is done properly. And of course, internal and external collaborations are critical to making all of these quality indicators come to life. Quality indicator 2 is all about timely manner, which is essentially making sure that students with disabilities receive their materials and technologies at the same time as their peers. So there's no delay. We know that this is very common, that students who need materials in a different format may have to wait a day, 2 days, in some cases weeks, to get the same materials that their peers are using. And we at the AIM Center, and we know all of you, know that that's unacceptable, that is puts students with disabilities at an extreme disadvantage. So the quality indicator here, quality indicator 2 around timely manner, this is put in place to support districts and states and schools to make sure that you have parts in place to help prevent students not getting their materials in a timely manner. And in general, timely manner means that learners who require accessible materials and technologies receive them at the same time that non-disabled peers receive theirs. Appropriate consideration is given to factors that could delay timely delivery, and agencies have clearly defined policies and procedures to identify and address any sources of delay. So some of the components that are under quality indicator 2 is that there's a state definition of timely manner as required by IDEA, and we'll hear some of that from our states who are presenting today. That you coordinate with accessible media producers like Bookshare or Learning Ally or the NIMAS. That you follow timelines that are required by instructional materials or instructional resource centers. So if you utilize your state center that converts materials into Braille or large print, that you abide by their requirements when it comes to giving them enough time to convert those materials so the student has their Braille book or their large print book at the same time as their peers. Prioritizing accessible, so working with vendors and making sure that accessibility is a priority and that your district, your state, your school buys accessible from the outset, that teachers, students, anybody who's in the position to create materials for learning or create materials for communicating with parents have the skills that they need to create materials that are accessible, whether it's a Word document or a website, and identifying and correcting any delays that surface as part of this system. Now, I just wanted, before we go into talking with the states, wanted to clarify, in some of the states you'll see that AIM is used interchangeably with AEM. So AEM is accessible educational materials. AIM is accessible instructional materials. I'm just going to say for the purpose of this webinar that they're the same thing. So please don't get caught up on that. AEM is a more recent term than AIM, but like I said, in conversations that you hear today and the information that's presented, you can use them interchangeably, as you'll probably see our presenters do. There is a link on the digital handout that goes with this webinar that gives you a little bit more background information about why we use both of those terms. It's just because things have evolved over time. So terms change, we know that happens in education all the time. And just wanted to take the opportunity, having mentioned that digital handout, to please be sure to go download that. It's on the event page, the same place where you'll download the PowerPoint for today. And it has all of the links, all the resources, and some background information that you won't find just in the PowerPoint alone. So as we begin, and we set out to learn from Texas, Ohio, and Iowa, I wanted just to give you a moment to reflect on quality indicators 1 and 2. If you have a little background knowledge already, and I know from recognizing some of your names that you are already familiar with the quality indicators, and I'm glad you're here to hear from some of your peers from other states, learn from them. Please contribute, because we know we have a lot to learn from all of you as well. Ask questions of these states. And as we set out and you reflect on just what we may have reviewed about the quality indicators 1 and 2, perhaps some of your own background knowledge, think about this question. To what extent are quality indicators 1 and 2 addressed in your own provision of materials and technologies for students? And I don't know what settings you're from. While you're reflecting on this, I'm going to go through the chat and see what people have entered for where you are, what your role is. If you haven't done that, please do. But be thinking about where on the spectrum, and this is a very short spectrum that I've selected here for this question, have you not started in your setting? Are these components somewhat a part of your provision system when you're procuring materials, when teachers are selecting materials or creating materials? Or are you really cooking? Do you have a lot of these components already in place in your provision system for students? So we're not going to make this public right now because we want to make sure that there's plenty of time for questions for our states who are presenting. But just be maybe on a piece of paper or on your phone in a note, just be thinking about, this is a pre-self-reflection. We're also going to do a post-self-reflection at the end. So it would be good to make a note of where you're rating yourself at this point. Okay, and it doesn't look like we have too many people who are entering where they're from and what they do. Really helpful if you would, if you'd be willing to do that. It gives us a little bit of background. Great. And some people are entering their thoughts in the chat around this question, so thank you. All right, we are going to go to Texas first, where Angela Standridge is going to introduce herself, say a little bit about her role in Texas. And there are two questions that Angela wanted to address, and those are, how are instructional materials selected and vetted in Texas? And how does Texas support the 100,000 plus, not that big, 1,000 plus school districts in providing access in a timely manner? Go ahead, Angela.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. A little bit about myself. My name is Angela Standridge. I'm an assistive technology consultant at Region 4 Education Service Center. So everything's bigger in Texas. We have 20 education service centers spread throughout the state geographically. And we are work in conjunction with the Texas Education Agency, providing support to public schools, districts, and public charter schools. We also provide technical assistance to a wide range of other entities like parents and private schools as well. And so Region 4 happens to hold the lead for assistive technology, the Texas Assistive Technology Network, and I'm currently the lead for that project. So if you look in your handouts, actually, there is a link to the TATN website, the Texas Assistive Technology Network. You can advance the slide, Joy. Not Joy, sorry, Cynthia. Thank you, okay. And there's actually, if you go to the website, there's a link or a tab at the top for additional resources. And under the additional resources, there's another link to accessible instructional materials. And when you get to that page, there is literally a Texas roadmap to accessible materials. Maps are a big deal in Texas. We're big, right? So when you click on the Texas roadmap for AIM, it literally takes you through the whole process of how districts can access those accessible materials. And our two providers are Bookshare and Learning Ally. So the TATN website has that information, as well as some other resources like how to work with publishers, how to make decisions when you're purchasing materials, how to make accessible materials if you're creating your own materials, things like that. Okay, then the other resource that is referenced in the handout is the TEA, or the Texas Education Agency website. So I want to talk just a little bit about how powerful I think the support they provided for that is. So if on the instructional materials section of the TEA website, that is where you begin to find the accessibility information. And the really cool thing is the push for this came out of general education and the acquisition of instructional materials. So it wasn't, well, there was a lot of persuasion from the special ed side, but the actual impetus came from general ed, which I think is why it's kind of come so far. So it's always buried in, or came about because of the way we adopt materials in Texas, which is, of course, is going to be a complex procedure. So they make a proclamation every year about the materials we're going to adopt, and there's always a cycle of which subjects we're looking at, and so on and so on. Well, what they did is in the proclamation, you can advance the slide again, Cynthia. In the proclamation, we're now in Proclamation 2019, they added accessibility requirements for all publishers. So it's a very elaborate document, multiple pages, multiple sections that address accessibility. But the end result of it is that materials that any publisher that is accepted and adopted in Texas must be 508 compliant and YCAG 2.0 compliant. They must provide a contact person in their publishing company that is the accessibility person. So if there's a snafu, TEA has somebody to contact to say, hey, something's not working. They also have to get a third-party audit of their accessibility. So that means they have to hire a third company to come and take a look at the materials and say, yes, these materials are accessible. And in addition to that, this last go-around in 2019, every year it gets a little better and better. They add more information. They're very specific about what must be included in that audit. So that's fairly significant to say that they have to do that. And the cool thing is, if Texas is making publishers do that, because we are such a large customer, by default, that will be true for other states if they request that from the publishers as well. So then they've got the audit. They also have to be able to say that their materials are in NIMAS format, and they have to upload their materials to the NIMAC if they are approved to be on the list. So the way materials acquisition works in Texas vets these materials. They make it through this approval process. They've met all the accessibility requirements. They've got the third-party audit. They've made materials available to the NIMAC. Then they are put on the drop-down of materials that districts can order, and they have an electronic online process for ordering these through the TEA website. In addition to that, if they at any time become non-compliant in any of those access areas, they can be immediately removed from that list. So the cool thing is you can't go in and order from the Texas list, but the list itself is public. So any district or entity that was looking for, gosh, is there already some vetted science materials that I know are accessible? You can go look at the list that's on the TEA site and pull from that list. The other caveat they kind of added to this is that if a district chooses to use materials that are not on the allotment list, then they are responsible for providing accessibility for those tools. And there's been a few districts that's kind of come back to haunt them a little bit. There was a kind of a rather famous story of a district, and some teacher wanted a very specific calculus book for a very advanced class, and it wasn't accessible, and that district had to pay to have it made accessible because it was not in that pre-approved list. So then once you're on the list, any district can purchase from you. We do have two providers. We use Bookshare and Learning Ally, and that is made available to pretty much any student in Texas who has a print disability. And the ESCs kind of are the touch point between TEA and the districts to inform them about how to access that. Each of those entities has a specific website for Texas only. And then we also have some local representatives we work with that do training and support the districts as well. So I don't remember the numbers, but I know there's several in the states, because we're so geographically large, that actually support certain parts of Texas. Let's see if I forgot anything. Oh, and then we do also have some open source materials available. We use OpenStack and StudyEdge, and they're supposed to be accessible. I know that sometimes doesn't always play out as well as it should. That's a little bit of we're working on that, right? As a profession and as professionals, we're trying to get that to work. And then we do a lot of training at the education service centers with districts on if they're going to make teacher-made materials, how are they going to do that in a way that's accessible? So we have a lot of trainings we do on how to make accessible PDFs and accessible Word documents and accessible slideshows. And if a district is a Google district, how to make Google documents accessible. And that's more of an individual, that the 20 ASCs handle that individually with the districts that they serve. But that certainly has more room for growth. And I think that is about it. And I would encourage you to go take a look at our proclamation, because we have figured out what you need to ask of publishers, so you could incorporate that into any documents or procedures or guidelines you're working on. And I would encourage you to take a look at our list, because don't reinvent the wheel if it has already been done.
And Angela, I just wanted to make a few comments on your Proclamation 2019, and I know that it goes into 2020 as well.
It's always 1 year behind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's the most robust accessibility policy in the nation. So I think to have not only this expectation that that accessibility is explicit in Texas's adoption process, but also that it has specific requirements, like the requirement that there be an accessibility professional as part of that team, that there is an external third-party audit for accessibility, that if at any time that product is no longer accessible, it gets removed from the adoption list. So I think all of that is really a lot of people would think that that's a radical approach, but of course we know that that's what it takes. Texas has opted for this stance that accessibility is a requirement, that if it's not, then you're continuously at risk of putting up barriers for students. So I really appreciate that Texas has done this, and thank Texas. And I think it's really important as part of this quality indicator webinar series that Texas's policy is widely shared so other people understand that, you know, Texas being a big state, being a large market for textbook publishers and digital materials, this is really important.
So, and 3 more comments extending from that. One is that we also have accessibility personnel at TEA, so that if a district has a problem, they just email or contact them directly, and then they go deal with the publisher if there's a problem. So the districts aren't having to, you know, if it says it's accessible and it's not, they don't have to deal with the publisher. They just contact TEA and say, it's not, what do I do? And TEA will take it from there, which is, I think, a powerful thing. Another thing is that, well, okay, I totally forgot what I was going to say now. Sorry. Oh, I know the new thing that they're doing now. Okay, so they just recently finished an RFP for the auditing companies. So they want to be able to provide a list of the available auditors that a publisher could use, because when you know, if you just Google it, bunches and bunches come up, and it's not very clear what the quality of all those auditors might be. So they're going to provide sort of these are the people you might try to look at for your third-party audit, which I thought was kind of a very proactive thing to do. It's enabling those publishers to be more successful. And then what I recently found out at a conference last week was that just because Texas required XYZ publisher to create something accessibly doesn't mean that when they go to the next state over, they'll say, oh, by the way, this is available in accessible format. You actually as a state have to ask and say, okay, do you have it accessible? And then they go, oh yeah, we just did it for Texas, here you go, we'll make it part of your package. But if you don't ask, they do not necessarily provide it automatically. So
and
that was
Angela, how did you learn that? How did you learn that
well, at that AIM meeting, somebody shared that with me. The one we did on Wednesday with all the kind of state level people. I don't remember who told me, but I was just like, what? Because you would think they would make that a selling point, but apparently not.
Well, that is unfortunate. So just because it's on Texas's list does not mean that what you request from the publisher or the vendor.
You just have to ask for it when you request it. You have to say, and we want the accessible version too.
We want what you give to Texas.
There you go. That's what you got to say.
We want what Texas gets. And the one other thing I wanted to mention before we move on to Iowa is that Texas includes in its contract language and in its expectations for the adoption list that if there are, of course, with print materials, that there's a requirement that publishers deposit the NIMAS file of that book into the NIMAC. And if this is new to you, just know that there's information on our website. If you have questions, follow up with us. But not always do districts and states include that if it's a science or a math book, that the publisher uses the Math ML3 markup code.
That was new this year too, yeah.
Yeah, so, and that's something else, you know, as you're learning about these quality indicators, what to request from publishers, there's more information on our website about that. And like I said, make sure you reach out to us if you have more questions, because oftentimes when there's the conversion of a standard print math book to a digital text accessible math book.
You lose
The
something.
math notation does not transfer into an accessible format. That's why Math ML3 code is so important, the NIMAS DAISY format. Okay, and please be entering questions in the chat. Please don't be shy. If you have questions, we'll have some time at the end where you can ask questions of Angela and Joy and Rachel. So please don't hesitate to get your questions in now, and we'll go back to them as we get to the Q&A. All right, Joy Lyons.
Hi, I'm Joy Lyons. I'm the AIM coordinator for the state of Iowa at the Iowa Department of Education. And I wanted to let you know that Iowa does have a robust Braille transcription service through the Iowa Department for the Blind when curriculum is known early, and districts can send the materials in to be prepared for the next school year. But today I'm going to highlight a service in Iowa that is known as the Braille on Demand service. And this is, I think when you go to the next slide, you can see that the Braille on Demand is a service provided through Iowa Prison Industries, and it really was designed for districts and teachers who, now that people are working in such a collaborative model, they may identify some materials that they didn't know at the end of the last school year that they were going to need. So teachers can send those materials to Braille on Demand, and they will be returned within 1 to 2 business days. So teachers can upload a scanned document, and they do prefer PDF, but of a small quantity of materials, like 10 pages or less. And so those will be sent back to the district within 24 hours. And if the teacher sends something that needs to be made into tactile or raised line equivalent to graphics in the material, those are processed and shipped as hard copies, and the intent is for that to be done and shipped out the next day. So kind of a remarkable thing about this service is that teachers have really embraced it, and so the work has grown exponentially since the service was started in 2015. If you want to look at the next slide, there's a little bit of information about, oh, my voice is cutting in and out. Is this better now? The Braille on Demand folks have, okay, thank you. The Braille on Demand folks have done a presentation at Closing the Gap at the last conference, and they also have an article that was published in the Closing the Gap Solutions magazine. And just recently, they were featured on the Accessibilities podcast from UMass Amherst, and there are links to those different additional pieces of information in your handout today.
Great, thanks, Joy. And we can credit AIM Center, our resident AIM Center media follower, Luis Perez, for tipping us off on these 2 places where Iowa's Braille on Demand service has been highlighted, which we're really excited to see. And Joy, would you say a little bit more about the impact? I know we have a testimonial on the next slide from a teacher of the visually impaired, but would you speak a little bit to what you know about the impact that this has, more widely in Iowa and the people who are involved in this service?
It has been really embraced by the teachers of the visually impaired, and the Iowa Prison Industries does a survey every year, and they've gotten very positive comments about it. One kind of exciting piece of this that has grown out of the program is that the folks who do the Braille transcription at Iowa Prison Industries are offenders. And when the offenders are released, some of them have been interested in continuing to provide this kind of service. And they are certified in doing Braille transcription. They go through a fairly rigorous process to become part of that group. And actually, some of the folks who do that have commented that being part of this program is really the best job at Iowa Prison Industries. So, so I think it's been good for students, it's been good for teachers, and for the folks who in the Iowa Prison Industries who've learned how to do this job.
Great, thank you. And I think there's also, I'm not sure actually if it got into the digital handout, but American Printing House does have a publication on how other states can develop their own Braille on Demand services through their prison systems. And as Joy mentioned, this has been a huge success in Iowa on multiple accounts. And we know that it's very difficult to do a turnaround with Braille for commercial materials. And I think as we see open education resources become more and more adopted by states and districts, a service like Braille on Demand in Iowa will be critical to make sure that there's a quick turnaround of materials that may not have been selected within weeks, let alone maybe there may be some cases where a material is selected within days of its being used in the classroom. And a Braille on Demand service like this, I think, is a great model for providing timely manner for all students. And Joy, I know that you've got a quote here from one of the TVIs who has benefited from this service.
Yeah,
Want to go ahead and read that?
This individual said that Braille on Demand has really been a game changer in regards to their job. It's really the perfect name for a service that's gone far towards letting students with sight impairments have materials at the same time as their peers.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And there'll be a chance to ask Joy some more questions about Braille on Demand during the Q&A. In the meantime, so please be dropping your questions, your comments in the chat. Keep those coming. And we're going to move on to Rachel in Ohio.
Hi, everybody. I'm Rachel Schultz. I'm the Accessible Educational Materials Specialist at the Assistive Technology and Accessible Educational Materials Center. We can move on to the next slide, please, Cynthia. So in Ohio, the AEM Center is just going on to its 3-year anniversary. It was established based on the merging of 2 separate entities. One was focused on accessible educational materials, and that was housed at the Ohio State School for the Blind, and one focused more on a assistive technology, and that has always been housed at Ocali. So once the 2 merged together, we were really able to expand the scope of AIM and reach a broader range of students with print disabilities. And we've also been able to have broader conversations surrounding AIM so that it can benefit all learners and we can get it into the hands of more learners. We are funded by the State Department of Education, and we work very collaboratively with our colleagues out of the Office for Exceptional Children within ODE. You do have contact information for both myself and Sarah Boney. She is typically with me in regards to AIM work throughout the state of Ohio, but she couldn't be here with us today. So if you do have any questions, you can always feel free to contact me or Sarah Boney through the State Department. Both of our contact informations are available on the handouts that were provided. So moving on to the coordinated system, we, of course, as Cynthia mentioned, with the Quality Indicator 1, a coordinated system, it's really important for students to have access to specialized formats when they need them, and specifically in a timely manner. So that gets into our quality indicator number 2. And the AT&AIM Center has made provision system development a high priority and a really main area of focus. And in order to have a coordinated system across the state, the AT&AIM Center receives all requests for accessible educational materials. And then through that online system, we then connect teachers and educators and educational professionals to the AIM that they need. And so, of course, we partner with Bookshare and Learning Alley for access to those digital accessible materials. And then we also have a few of our own services as a sender ourselves. And so that is on the next slide. So we have so the AT&AIM Center does administer the federal quota registration. So that's one of our main ways that we collect registrations and have funds and distribute funds and materials for accessible educational materials. But like I said, with the merger of the AIM Center and the AT Center, we were able to reach a broader range of students with print disabilities. And so part of that is through our own clearinghouse library. We have a library of large print, Braille, and then a variety of assistive technology and accessible technologies in our clearinghouse library. And any student in the state of Ohio that needs accessible educational materials, if those materials are in our clearinghouse, then it goes directly to them. It is technically on loan, but it stays with the student for as long as they need it or for the length of their K-12 education. And then in addition to our clearinghouse library, we do have an on-site production center. And our on-site production center offers materials in large print, Braille, digital, and audio. And we will also do tactile graphics. Most of what we produce is Braille and large print. And then there would probably be tactile graphics. We don't produce a lot of audio and digital materials because of resources such as Bookshare and Learning Ally. And then we also have a lending library. The lending library is different from our clearinghouse library. Our lending library has accessible educational materials, assistive technology devices, accessible technologies, and also some testing or norm reference testing, and this is short-term loans. So the idea behind our lending library is for educators to request materials for students to try before they go ahead and purchase the materials through federal quota funds, district funds, or whatever private funding they're able to access. So the lending library allows for that trial period so that educational teams can really make an informed decision about what type of AIM or AT device a student needs. So all of this information is available on our website. If you were to go to ataem.org, we have a drop-down menu for accessible educational materials. And then if you select obtaining AIM, you'll see a link for independent resources. Those independent resources link to external organizations such as Bookshare or Learning Ally. And then we also have the AIM Center link, which connects you to AIM request for the state. Again, those could be for students who qualify for federal quota funds, students who need access to a NIMAS file that our production center can then produce in Braille or large print. We also have a link for federal quota, and that provides all of the information that anybody would need to register students, again, to submit a request for materials for a student. And we also have information on NIMAS and then some purchasing guidelines. So we have information on purchasing accessible learning materials. And we also have links for both the Ohio Revised Code for adoption of purchase of textbooks and the Ohio Administrative Code for providing instructional materials to children with visual impairments and other print disabilities. I think that's pretty much it.
Okay, thank you, Rachel.
Yeah.
A lot of great resources at the AT&AIM Center at Ocali. Rachel, did you say what Ocali stands for?
So Ocali has had a very rich history of serving students with disabilities throughout Ohio. So we serve the lifespan. We serve students with all types of disabilities or people with all types of disabilities. And Ocali started as a sister organization from another organization that Ohio once had. And when it started, it was largely funded by funding for autism. And so it started as the Ohio Center for Autism and Low Incidence. In just the past year or two, conversations at our organization have really started to focus on how we can use our name and keep our acronym, but really make it clear to Ohio and our national partners that we really do serve students with all types of disabilities and across the lifespan. So while it is the Ohio Center for Autism and Low Incidence, we're currently in conversation on how we kind of move away from that one isolated type of service or support. So sorry for the long answer, but that's the answer.
No, I think that's really important and helpful for people who go to your website, because there's also additional information that we didn't put in the slides to save some time that people will also find in the digital handout about Ocali and the AEM Center. So I just wanted to give you a chance to say a little bit about that. Thank you. So we're here for the Q&A section of the webinar. And of course, we're talking about timely manner through a coordinated system. And we want to give you a chance to ask some questions of Rachel, Angela, or Joy. So I've been scrolling through the chat to see what has come up since the webinar started. And just wanted to pull some of the comments that have been made. So Eileen Garza said early on in the webinar that they're definitely thinking about, and I think this is about accessibility in provision systems. We provided some CAT, in quotation marks, curriculum access tools for all students and staff to support reading and writing. We have a team who participated in the book adoption process, and their role was examining and giving feedback on accessibility. So that definitely is, if it's not somewhat, it's starting to cook, Eileen. So thank you. And I'm gonna, you must have introduced yourself earlier in the chat, but if you just want to say, just add to the chat at this point where you're from and what your role is, and that will put your comment there in context. Thank you for that. And then there was somebody who is no longer in the classroom, but at some point when this person was in the classroom, that they were really proactive. And of course, being proactive is the best way to avoid retrofitting materials or having to choose a different technology for an individual student because accessibility wasn't a forethought or built into the decision-making process. So we really like to hear that. We'd like to hear that word of forethought, proactive. Kay in Florida is saying Florida's really cooking, can use a little seasoning to improve, but we are good. And we know that Florida is one of the AIM best practices cohort states, and Kay will be joining us later in the webinar series to talk about data collection. And then Emily has been in the chat talking about being in higher ed, and there are higher ed quality indicators. For those of you who are here who may be interested on the higher end side of accessibility and the provision of accessible materials and technologies for students in post-secondary settings. So you'll see that I've been chatting with Emily about those quality indicators for higher ed, and we do have a focus group of higher ed professionals who are working on models of implementation of the quality indicators for higher education. This particular webinar series, we're focusing on K-12 because it's just really helpful, I think, to have a focus and a focus group to talk about one particular area. And K-12 really has been the most developed of our quality indicators. And then I know that we had some comments. Louise, thank you for your comment about the Braille on Demand service having such a positive impact on the inmates who are involved in that program, and it leads to jobs for them when they exit the prison system. And then we come to a question, another question from, or comment from Eileen, and she's asking, I think this is, goes to the clearinghouse. I think this is a question for Rachel. She asks, are the materials in your clearinghouse accessible by any student or only those covered under Chafee?
So, okay, so the short answer is any of the materials in our clearinghouse would be available to any student. We do have a few exceptions. A lot of the devices or related materials that are higher end items that were purchased through federal quota funds typically only go back out to students who qualify for federal quota. So for example, if we have a Mac Connect that was once purchased for a student through APH who qualified for federal quota and we get that device back, then in order for that item to go out again, we would expect the next student to qualify for federal quota. Other than that, we really don't have strict or harsh requirements. If we have the materials in our clearinghouse library and we have a teacher saying that a student needs that material or that item, then we typically send it out pretty quickly without too many questions or guidelines or requirements. Let me know if you have more questions or if that wasn't clear enough.
Thanks, Rachel. And looks like David was asking Angela where Region 4 is located. And it looks like that was addressed. Angela, do you want to say anything about the other regions in Texas and how what makes Region 4 sort of a hub for accessibility and technical assistance in Texas?
I will talk to that. So many years ago, like 25 years ago, two consultants here at Region 4, Joy Zabala and Diana Carl, which some of you that may sound familiar, they've been involved with AIM for a long time, started an assistive technology team training program here at Region 4, and the director at that time allocated a significant amount of funds to support that, and we began growing a loan library. So we have a very extensive loan library that's available to our local Region 4 customers, and also if a region chooses to participate, it can be through the other regions as well. So the other 19 regions can borrow our equipment to then lend to their school districts for trials as well. Not every region center participates with that. So just because of that initial program that was started, we hired more AT consultants at Region 4. So we have a complement of 4 right now. There's 2 speech therapists, 1 OT and 1 VI specialist, and also our consultant who deals with hearing impairment also has a very strong technology background. So we just have sort of the largest lab and the largest contingent of consultants. And because of that, when TEA awarded grants for the Texas AT Network like 20 years ago, they selected Region 4 and it's been here since then. There is some changes beginning to happen. They are doing a re-granting process, but we anticipate to still be involved in supporting assistive technology in some capacity with the state, but they're sort of shuffling it up a little bit. But we probably Region 4 will still be providing a lot of support in that aspect.
Great, thank you. And you have your TATN conference in June, right? So, and
I
hear that that
Louise is presenting too.
Yeah, well, I hear that it's going to be a a real blowout, right?
Well, this is the last year we'll have this conference. There may be other conferences in the future, but yes, we have a conference every summer if you feel like coming to Texas in our heat. But we usually have 1 day of national presenters and then a day of concurrent sessions from district folks, and then we have an exhibit hall as well. So it's not as big as ATIA or something like that. We have about 700 people come, but it is much less expensive than ATIA too. So anybody's welcome.
Great, thank you. And they can reach out to you for more information about TATN. Okay, so now we've come to close to the end of the webinar. We just have a few more things to share with you before we close out. But I wanted to give you an opportunity to take that same question that we asked at the beginning, the self-reflection about the quality indicators and the critical components as they relate to your current setting, wherever that may be, and to what extent are they present? Those critical components, the statement around the quality indicators and their intent is in your setting. Has it not started? Are these components and the concept of these quality indicators somewhat present, or are you really cooking? And what, if you want to just say a few things in the chat at this time that might help us with determining what type of technical assistance might be helpful. And we also can be incorporating some of your comments into the remaining 4 webinars that are part of this 5-part webinar series. So if you want to give us some feedback, if you're not started, what's concerning you? What are some things that may be helpful in getting you started? If you're somewhat in progress with these quality indicators and critical components, what's working? Have you identified where some of the weaknesses, the gaps are in your system? And if you're really cooking, why? What is it about quality indicators 1 and 2 that really have some strength within your system? And David has another follow-up question for you, Angela. He asked, what percentage of Region 4 would be rural schools? And you are muted if you're talking.
Hang on. I was going to type it, then I remembered, oh wait, I'm connected, I can do a video. We actually, oddly, in Region 4 have quite a mix. People think Houston and just think big city. To guess at a percentage, I would maybe say 25% might be more rural districts. Some of the districts are both urban, suburban, and rural all at once. So we have sort of a little bit of a joke here that there's 100 different districts and 100 different ways they do it. So we have very much local control in Texas. So even for the region centers that have only rural or more urban districts only, it's still a mixed bag what those region centers are supporting. Did that answer your question, David? Perfect.
Okay, great. Okay, and I just wanted to give everybody a heads up that the AIM Center is in the process of developing an AIM progress monitoring tool, and this will be available as a resource for the target audience for now is districts, but we're hoping that this particular tool that we're in the process of developing will serve as a foundation that we can then build on, and not only build on for districts, but at the state level, have a tool for higher ed, but a way that districts, states, higher ed eventually can measure their progress toward meeting the quality indicator over time. The tool, like I said, which is currently being designed with districts as the target audience, also has some teachable pieces in it, has the ability to output reports. And we just received feedback on a prototype for this tool last week at the Assistive Technology Industry Association. We got feedback from some of the states that we work with, and that is on track to be released sometime this summer. And I'll be talking a little bit about that throughout this webinar series, but wanted to let you know that we understand that the quality indicators as they currently exist and are presented on our website aren't all that helpful. We're hoping that this series of webinars will help supplement and give people a little bit more guidance and background and some supports, resources to help you all implement those quality indicators. But that tool is something that you can use collaboratively with a team, and a way that you can self-assess, evaluate, measure, and improve over time. And we're really excited about this tool. Like I said, we're hoping to release it this summer, if not September at the very latest, but we're hoping that we can release that this summer. We are currently in the process of naming the tool. We got some feedback from some of the states we worked with last week. So you may see Accessolution as the tool on the horizon. Could be Track Accessibility, Accessiful. If you have ideas for what we could name our tool, we welcome your input. We should probably give some kind of a prize for taking something as dry as progress monitoring tool and giving it a clever and savvy name that it actually really deserves, because we think that this tool is going to be really transformational in supporting the provision of AIM for students who need them. So we have, we're wrapping up. I'm just going to close out. I know Eileen just put a comment in the chat that I'll go to in just a moment. For those of you who need to leave here at the top of the hour, just wanted to let you know that all of the contact information for all of our presenters are in the digital handout. I know Leslie has also been dropping contact information and resources in the chat. Thank you so much, Leslie. And Stacy has been, as always, really helpful with the captions, and can't thank you enough for the quality of those captions. This webinar has been recorded and will be posted on the AIM Center website. And I believe that Leslie, if she hasn't already, has dropped the link to the evaluation in the chat, and it's also on your screen. So thank you for being with us today. I'll jump back up to Eileen's comment, excuse me. And Eileen's saying, we're working really hard to not be focused on eligibility, but focusing on best teaching practices for all. This is a terrific comment. The district's incorporating project-based learning and the curriculum access tools like text-to-speech, predictive spelling, study skills, PDF annotation, Google Schools, etc., so that all students can use what they need. We're trying to be intentional in providing timely access by using improved communication between campuses and administration so that we can anticipate and have resources that offer sufficient flexibility to be adapted to individual needs. We'll always have those students who have needs beyond what we anticipate, and we are trying to make sure that we can address those needs in a timely fashion as well. Excellent comment. Can I rely on one of our panelists just to pick up that comment and say a few things from your perspective, your thoughts about you know, how that rings into your practice?
This is Angela. I'll comment. So we absolutely take that perspective, and we try within the service centers to even model some of that so that we, you know, cross the hallway and work with our partners in digital learning and in general education and really make it more student focused and not about the disability or how to fix it, but what does anybody need in one given moment to do the task that's at hand. Sometimes it's harder to bring, you know, the rest of everybody else along with us on that, but that's definitely an excellent focus. And by the way, Eileen is a rock star in Region 4. I'm just going to add that.
All right, thank you for bringing her along, Angela. That's a model comment right there about how the AIM Center, our colleague, CAST colleague, Mindy Johnson, has a quote that she shares that we have adopted as our motto. It's my Angelo quote, who I actually keep her here on my desk. And the quote is something like, do the best you can while you know what that is, and then when you know better, do better. And I think that that's really reflected in Eileen's comment that, you know, you have a lot of knowledge, you have a lot of skills, but even with all of that, we know that this takes time. That's why we work with states and districts at the AIM Center. That's why we're bringing this webinar series out into the field so that we can collect more information, so that we can learn, we can improve, so that all of you can better serve students. So thank you for taking the time for being here. Thank you so much to our panel, Angela and Joy and Rachel. Really appreciate that you've worked with me not only just to get this webinar out, but obviously many years of collaboration. And if each of you just wants to say a couple of things and goodbye, and then we'll close out.
Okay, well, thank you for the opportunity, Cynthia. Wasn't as difficult as I thought it would be, and please feel free to contact me if y'all have any more questions or concerns or want a specific link to some of those places on the TEA site or in the proclamation that you might want to copy and steal for your own state.
I just want to say thank you to the AIM Center and Cynthia and Louise in particular for the opportunity to be part of this and to hear more from my colleagues in Texas and Ohio with detail about what they're doing related to these quality indicators. Thank you.
Okay, and Rachel, if you're speaking, you're muted. Okay, we might not have Rachel. So thank you so much for joining us, and I think we can close the recording. Hopefully we'll see you on February 13th, next Tuesday at 3 o'clock for the second webinar in our series, which is all about written guidelines. Thank you.